graded or assessed according to their skill level at that time. If a student is not engaged, I'll sit down with them and I'll literally take their hand and help them. And so I draw with them and until they can eventually understand.
I know one of the things that you had brought up in your pre-observation, you asked me to watch for. It was hard in this lesson because you still hadn't gotten to that point. It was more of guided practice and so forth, and then individual work. But you were concerned about making sure that you got to all the students and got to all their needs. Do you talk a little bit about that, on how that's a challenge for you sometimes?
Well, it's a challenge because I have 30 students, 25 to 30 students in my classroom. And a lot of times I'll hear, Miss Phillips, I need you. Miss Phillips, I need you. And so you go to the students that need you the most at the time, and you have a tendency to forget the ones that are quiet, that are working at their table quietly. And so that's something I'm constantly aware of and constantly working on, is getting to those students who are not as vocal for their needs. One thing that I did do this lesson that I changed up a little bit, and it worked beautifully, is I had a few students put away their subject, which is garlic. They put that away, and then they were like, now what do I do? Because I've lost my visual for the next lesson. So what I decided to do is take pictures of their composition before they put their pieces away, because I only see them every other day. And other students are using the same subject matter. So I took pictures and I printed them off my computer, so they had that right in front of them. So they could start right away on their project, on their drawing, and while they were waiting for me to get to them, to help them. So that helped with the ease of, what do I do about my composition? And I'm going to sit here and wait until I find a new composition? No. They had a picture right in front of them.
What do you look for when you're trying to make sure that there's not disengagement? What signs from your students do you look for?
Well, if their phone is out and they're texting, there's a sign. And that's against the rules, right, too. So I deal with that. That's behavior discipline type of thing. If they're doodling, then I know that they're frustrated and they're not drawing what they need to draw. So I'll go up and like I said, I work a lot with one-on-one instruction. And so I keep my eyes open for those clues.
I guess what strategies would you put in place when you have a student that is really stubborn about becoming engaged in the art and the work that's been assigned?
Sometimes I'll ask them, what is it that you are not enjoying? And I'll try to explain again why we're doing what we're doing. And then I'll give them a different subject matter, or I'll give them a picture off of Google and say, let's try this first with the technique, then we'll go to the garlic, that type of thing. It is hard. Very rarely do I see that, to be honest with you.
That's good.
Very rarely. They really do want to do what it is I'm teaching. So I'm lucky there.
What do you think causes that desire? Do you think that's just innate in themselves, or
with teenagers? I don't know how innate that is. But I'll tell you, they've signed up for this class. So it was their choice. You do give them choices within the classroom. That helps. But I think, quite frankly, I think it's because I love what I do and I'm enthusiastic about it, and that kind of rolls over to the student. And they think, well, if she loves it, maybe there's something to it. And they bounce off of each other, too.
I wanted to hear you say that, because that's very noticeable in your classroom, the passion and the excitement you have when you teach, and the positive approach that you have with both the art itself and the students you work with. And I think they feel that. So
well, I feed off of them too.
Absolutely. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, the better they do, the more excited I get.
Well, looking at possibilities, you talked about the engagement. What will you continue, if you use this lesson this lesson some more, that ensures the amount of participation you want from your students?
Well, I will definitely continue the 3-minute drawings. I thought that went over really well, and it forces them to be engaged. I will definitely teach those same skills because I think that is important to have the basic skills to get started. I know now that they'll know at least what qualitative line means, what contour line means, what shading does as far as creating a 3-dimensional look. I know that they know those words, and I know that they understand what they mean. So when I am giving a new lesson, I can say, we're going to incorporate a little bit of qualitative line, but mostly what we're concentrating on in this lesson is shading, and they'll understand that.
So you're making those connections between prior knowledge and what you're trying to get them to reach for. Was there anything you would stop that might have inhibited student engagement?
I can't think of a thing. I mean, this was a really successful project.
And that's good.
Yeah. And it's still ongoing. I mean, every project that I do is step by step by step by step. You saw one step, and I can't wait for you to see what comes after that. With my AP students, I'm even taking them further with this.
The qualitative line is where you kind of start to end that particular lesson that day. Where are you going with that then?
Once they do the contour line drawing, and once they apply the qualitative line drawing to that object, the garlic, the piece of garlic, or the composition of garlic, then what I'm going to do is teach them the 3 types of shading, the shadow, the highlights, and the shade, and then they will incorporate the shading into their drawing also. In the past, they've been taught wrongly, if I admit it, that they use their finger for shading, and that is not what we do here, and that's not what professional artists do. They use different levels of grades of pencils to create the lights and the darks, and so that is a huge step for them to learn to switch from a 6B pencil to a 2.
And you just started that at the end. You introduced the pencils, so that's where you're going to go. Is actual
practice. And that's where I'm going, is with the shading using the appropriate pencil or graphite.
Oh, okay. What about, is there something more that you will start or do differently if you use this lesson again that might increase their engagement? I know you spoke to the fact that you had really good response. Was that throughout, because I know you taught more in one class.
Yep, it was throughout all 6 of my classes that I taught this to. And they range from painting and drawing 2, 3, 4, and AP. And I encourage the AP to do the exact same thing, but take it a step further. So as far as adding color, maybe a little watercolor or colored pencil to their work. But drawing from observation is a skill that every one of my students needs to learn before we move on to anything else.
Well, and I think if you look at the success you had, what if you could name like 3 things that led to the success you've had with this lesson, what would they be?
Number 1, I think it was the planning of the steps for that one day. As far as the PowerPoint and introduction to the history of drawing, talking about other students that have done it, talking about myself that have done this, talking about professional artists that use this technique. Even the 3-minute drawings, a lot of professional artists use that to warm up. I think the progression of the lesson went really well, and I think I would keep that just the way it worked. As far as something I would change, for the lesson that you saw, I wouldn't change that because it was very successful. I think for me to understand that it is very difficult, the qualitative line part is very difficult, and to give them more time to practice. That's probably what I would change.
Is there a way that as you move through, I know everybody has pacing guides and everybody has to meet certain guidelines as you move, but are there moments where someone might get ahead, or?
Oh, yes.
So there's opportunity that they could have mini lessons or?
Yes, and you know, there's many times where I'll hand them, or I'll say, go to cupboard number 13 and grab an item out of there, and let's try it with this item instead. It's the drawing from observations, not necessarily the garlic, that's the important thing. So if they get done with their garlic and they did not, and this happened today, a student came up to me and she says, I'm finished. What's my grade? And I said, well, I'll tell you, just as a summative assessment, you do not have any qualitative line on this piece. You didn't do any shading on this, so you are not done.
How are they supposed to know that that's what they're supposed to do to meet that, besides the instruction itself?
Well,
do you have an assessment that you
I have an
them?
assessment sheet for them to look at. I've given that to them so they know, and I've read through it and referred back to those things. A lot of students, I wouldn't say a lot, a few students just are doing it for a grade. And they have to understand that it's not the grade that's important, it's the actual process that they're learning that I'm looking for.
I know when you look in here, you gave examples of proficient and what advanced or exemplary would look like. But you have a rubric, I believe, you showed me, that has 4 steps. So they can earn a proficient score on above.
Right,
Yeah.
definitely. And I'll tell you, in art, you never stop learning. There is never a time. I still take classes because it helps me just stay creative. And I tell the students that you never, ever are completely proficient in a skill. It's like playing the guitar or basketball. You can always get better at it. And so to be proficient in high school, I go through these steps, but I'm always looking for maybe even a step higher, or someone who wants to try again on another subject area, or keep practicing.
So you mentioned 3 things that were successful for this to get the engagement that you want. Can you think of a lesson where there were things missing that you wish you'd had in place that would help engagement be better, and what those things might be? Or
in the past, there's no question that it helped. This lesson helped to take pictures of their composition, and I never did that in the past. So I learned something for myself, that this using technology helps in a lot of ways. And I can take a photograph, or they can photograph their composition on their phone. Now that they have smartphones, they're wonderful. As long as they're not texting, and they're using them as a visual, then that has really come in handy.
So when you talk about define composition for me, you're talking about the garlic as it lays in front of them as they draw it.
Yes, and there are rules of composition. And so that's another thing I had to teach, is overlapping and placement of the garlic. Where on the paper, if it's up high on the paper, it's farther away. If it's lower on the paper, it's closer to you. If it's larger, it's closer to you. If it's smaller, it's farther away. If it is brighter in contrast, it's closer to you. If it's far away, then it's foggy. And I'll take them out into the hall and have them look down the hall and have somebody standing way back, and it's smaller. They're smaller. If they're close up, they're bigger. And so they can see it. They can see the rules of composition. So when they put their composition down on the table with an object, whatever it is, this one is garlic, I always have them put maybe 3 pieces, large, medium, small, one in front of another, one in back. So they have those concepts in front of them. And so once they have a composition, we have to take a picture of it, because they worked hard at putting that together.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people who are not artists don't realize that is not easy to do, to put a good composition together. So to have that on film and on a picture right in front of you, it helps tremendously. They're not thinking about their composition at that point, they're thinking about drawing it.
Well, we were going through and we're trying to set goals or talk about goals. So, it's in talking about growth there is, to what extent were students engaged? I think in this lesson it showed you had really good engagement. And it wasn't just in the class I observed, it was throughout.
Throughout all the classes.
But it was interesting that you brought that up as something that you're concerned about. But I think that's a reflection of a concern a lot of people that do a good job teaching they want their students to be passionate and believe in what they're saying too. So did you alter your goals or